Every today we're going to talk about automatic horizontal scalability and unified liquidity using Saga. One of the things that I want to talk about is how we want to remove barriers for builders. And so my name is Jin Kwon, I'm one of the co-founders of the project. And before co-founded Saga, I was at something called Pyramid built down Cosmos. And one of the things that I've been always thinking about throughout the years, the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, is, if everyone in the Cosmos ecosystem knows that actually enjoy a feature, that's, it's a very common belief that it's more scalable, it's better infrastructure, and there's more customizability. Why are developers not launching more appchains today? It's like the fundamental question that I've been kind of walking around for a few years. And the answer can come pretty simply. So there are many requirements to launching your own chain besides just developing your application. So on top, there's the application development, but you also need to worry about infrastructure deployment. So there's the validators you have to go talk to. You have to convince the validators that your application is worth hosting. You have to convince them that your application will have some value, right? So they will dedicate infrastructure onto it. In order for you to do that, you need to create a staking token. You need to go, sell the staking token to the public so that people will stake and secure the actual network. And then it kind of relates to the validators because the validators need to be convinced that your staking token is worth holding onto ultimately. And then on top of that, there's more infrastructure that you need to place besides just the blockchain infrastructure because RPC, indexers, wallet services, these are all things that the developer has to think about and procure before they can actually deploy their own app chain. And then on top of that, because your app chain is your own space that you set up, you need to set up bridges, relayers, all this other infrastructure that most Cosmos folks I kind of do on default. But for most developers, there are things that generally they don't think about. They want to just worry about the application development. And then related to bridges, relayers, etc. You need to bootstrap liquidity for your tokens because, as mentioned, the way that you convince validators to come in and the way that you secure your chain is ultimately through a staking token. You need that to have some kind of value ultimately. So you need on-ramps to USDC, maybe osmosis, right? DEXs, centralized exchanges, etc. And then obviously you need to do even more on top of that because now that you are required to have a token, you need to think about token distribution. You need to think about marketing for your token distribution. That in some cases you might not want a token, but now you're forced to because you have to launch a staking token. So the fact of the matter is most developers can follow just the path of these. And I just kind of outlined a very small subset. There's a lot more to this to launching your own app chain ultimately. But I outlined essentially some of the requirements that you have when you immediately launch. But when you go and deploy on someone else's layer 1 or layer 2, it's a lot simpler than this. So let's kind of go down the list one at a time. So validators, you don't need to worry about validators. The layer 1 is already going to figure that out for you. You don't need a staking token. You don't need to solicit security. So that's not the wire. You don't need RPC indexers, wallets, and services. The layer 1 has already procured a list of these services for you, right? So they have RPC providers, they have indexers, they have wallets and services that universally work for the layer 1 chains. And then bridges layer you don't need because the other apps like Jackson and all this stuff is already in the same layer 1, so you don't need to worry about some of these conditions. Then the same thing happens over finance. To bootstrap liquidity, you don't need the connections to USDC, ETH, other chains, etc. It's already set by the layer 1, so you don't have to worry about that. And then the DEXs and XXL number are already integrated. So everything that I've just mentioned, essentially, the developers are looking at this. Is like, instead of me having to do all this myself, I would rather just go and deploy on someone else's. This is like the mentality of how developers are thinking about the trade-offs of going into apps. And then obviously go to market, there's like some complexity. Token distribution. The nice thing about going to the layer 1 and layer 2, a lot of the times you don't need a token. And you're relying on someone else's token, so you don't need to worry about token distribution. And then marketing, you kind of have the community of the layer 1s kind of piggyback off, which in an app chain setting, a lot of the times you don't have that. So these are the reasons why universally, there's a lot of reasons here, why people don't end up creating actions. They end up instead just deploying on someone else's chain that has been set up already. And while this is great, what ends up happening a lot of the times is everyone always said, hey, there's not enough block space. The economics is all too far, and we don't like it. It's like, well, you took the path of least resistance, so now you have to run with the outcome of having these kinds of trade-offs that you would say. I don't think developers fully think about that. They try to think about the least resistance. Usually the path ends up being a layer one. So, how do you do this? So, one of the things that we're doing at Saga is we're trying to remove each of these barriers one at a time. So, I'm going to go down the list of these specific problems, essentially, that appchains generally run into, and how Saga is slowly getting rid of all these one at a time. And so let's go through all of this. So step one, automated validators and chain deployment. So for those who don't know what Saga is, essentially what Saga does is it automatically spins up a costless chain for developers automatically. So how does this function? So a developer goes to our Saga platform essentially and put a transaction in our chain saying, hey, I would like a chain layer. And then this wasn't an icon. But the validators essentially are all launching the Saga platform, monitoring it, and when the chainlet request comes, our validator spins up a node essentially for a chainlet automatically, and then connects them all into the new chain. So the idea here is it's designed to be completely automated. So the process of a developer coming in and requesting that chainlet is the only manual factor. With the rest of the process essentially is all done through software. And so where are we right now? So Saga platform is currently in data launch. So what does that mean? It means that our chain validators are now currently running all the chainlets. We have a foundation that's currently operating 4 validators that launch. The reason why we're doing this is we're battle testing this automatic chain launching software essentially, and making sure that there isn't a problem here. As soon as you start decentralizing, problem solving becomes a lot harder. And so right now, so far since about October of 2023, we have launched about 1,500 chains and closed them down. Some of them have, essentially have stood up since the beginning of October and still up essentially, and some of them have gone up and down as testing happens. And so the status right now is with this platform that we have right now that we're battle testing, it takes about 2 minutes to launch a chainlet, and the 2 minutes is around when you put the transaction into the Saga platform. And then it takes time for the validators to start provisioning all the actual hardware in the background, and then connecting them all into and then launching that chain essentially. So it's probably about a minute, but it's about a minute or two depending on refresh. And so what's the next steps? This is the kind of next steps that we're working on. We want this step to be fully permissionless, done by our validator essentially, set for our mainnet. So that's happening as we speak right now. So this week, we started a pilot program with select validators in our mainnet to start running this Saga platform software and chain launching software in the background. So in the next few months, the idea is to have all of our mainnet validators running this, and then now we have an automatic way of launching a chain, proof of stake chain test with our platform open. So now, this is step one. We have like 19 different things we talked about earlier that we want to automate. So this is the kind of like where we are in. So, so the cool thing about this is, in Saga, when you do this, right, the chainlet and our Saga mainnet, every chain within our Saga has an identical set of validators. And so the nice property about this is that we can start automating bridging essentially between each of these chains that we're launching. And the awkward thing about IBC is that there's generally you're negotiating between two chains that have different validator sets. And then you need to introduce this like new layer that's a third party. Sometimes it's not correctly incentivized and might be part of its network. We don't know, because the difficulty is that each chain has a different set of validators that are running. In our system, that doesn't exist. And so what we can do is, because every chainlet has identical validators, we can actually put the relayer logic into our validator code such that the relayer responsibility is included in the actual validating logic that they're running. And so, what does this mean? This means that a developer goes and requests a chainlet, essentially launch the actual chainlet itself, but also have the relayer logic essentially embedded into that software. So instead, bridges between the Saga mainnet and the chainlets are automatically set up so that they don't have to go and actually talk to specific validators and say, we run relay from you to this other chain. It's all automatically set up. And the second thing that's really nice about this is generally when you have two different chains of two different validator sets, the destination chain of the IBC transaction requires the gas fee of the destination chain token. However, because within our system, everybody is kind of the same, we can just get rid of that. And we can inject IBC transactions directly into the destination chain. So now we can get rid of costs for any kind of IBC transactions and updating essentially within the Saga ecosystem. So you can bring up the infrastructure of the actual bridges automatically, and then now economically it's all automatic. And so this is the work we're doing with Strangelove. They have this concept of Enshrine IBC, which is kind of embedding this two-layer structure directly into the validator node structure. And then we have a proof of concept essentially that we've been testing with our software to make sure that we get this infrastructure in place. This is step 2. The cool thing about this is now you launch a chain. The chain essentially is a proof of stake chain and also has automatic bridging to every other chain within the Saga ecosystem. And you don't have to worry about any of that. So that's step 2. Step 3 is automating security. So this is pretty simple. Because you have an IBC connection between each and every chainlet and the Saga, you can essentially run CCD, which is the same CCD that the Cosmos Hub uses. CCD stands for questions validation. It's kind of like interchain security / restaking, like Cosmos uses to secure kind of a child chain within the ecosystem. But you can use the exact same mechanisms. The bridges are automatic. And now the nice thing about this also is that, as mentioned, there's no gas fees for any kind of IBC transaction that do this too. And so we can compensate all that and it's all completely automatic. So now, not only can someone go and launch a chain, but it is now bridges between that and the Saga mainnet. You can actually automatically secure that. So you're inheriting the entirety of the Saga mainnet. Each of the chainlets are completely decentralized and secure. So that's step 3. So step 4, automating service. So one of the things that appchain developers kind of run into very quickly after they launch the chain is that these services like RPC, explorers, indexers, like snapshot, storage, etc., there's like a trillion of these. They have to go and convince each of these operators, hey, we go and like run RPC for me. We go and run an explorer for me. There's a process. And so what we've done essentially is what's what we call the service provider set. And it kind of runs to the side. And whenever a developer goes and requests a chainlet from the Saga platform and a new chainlet is launched, our service provider stack goes and it spins up necessary services on the side. So these are right now, we are provisioning kind of simple services like RPC and Explorer for every chainlet. What we want to over time is to expand this out to all the services that have been developed. So, having number one would be not the foundation of all this, but service providers come and the patches their services on top of that. And then we want to bring economic flows to get third-party revenue to projects that are using this. So maybe similarly to how the foundation is currently running it, they will run like a free version for people, and then for chains essentially that require further services, they can get revenue from those things. And so, as mentioned, we want to add scope to index servers, storage, any kind of services that you need, essentially. And so, as mentioned earlier, we have the process of having the developer request the chainlet. Chain comes alive, bridges come alive automatically. And then the security is automatic, and you also get services automatic. This is kind of like the step 4 of where we're doing now. Step 5 is automating liquidity, and this is something that we haven't built before, but this is the next step of how to make lives easier for appchain developers. And so the idea is if a chainlet can be deployed automatically, you can deploy a new chainlet called, let's just call it Liquidity Rail chainlet. So it's like any other chainlet in our ecosystem. But we're going to anoint that chainlet essentially as the canonical Liquidity Rail chainlet essentially. What we can do now is we have the Interchain relayer IBC architecture that automatically spins up the connection from the chainlet to the mainnet. But now we can also automatically Interchain IBC connections from the chainlet to the liquidity layer. Every chain that Saga launches automatically connects to this liquidity layer using the infrastructure that we set up. And so the idea here is to have all cross-chain transactions kind of route through this router that unifies the liquidity across all the chainlets. And so because this entire process then now is automatic, now chainlet to chainlet conversations are always possible through this automatic IBC with the layers, and then we can kind of add further services on top here. So the next step for this is once all this is ready, it really takes about 2 minutes to launch the chainlet. It's super easy to do. You just have to do that in the system. Then we can start thinking about how to do on-ramp. So developers, app chain developers want an ability for outside kind of assets to flow into their chainlet. And so if we automatically go and do the BD of connecting to all the other ecosystems out there. So this is pretty simple to do. We just go to Axelar and say, hey, Axelar, right now Axelar is currently connected to the Saga platform, but would you like to connect to the liquidity rail? And if we do the integration at one time and everyone can share these rails essentially automatically. And so USDC, Osmosis, Stargaze, all these ecosystems you can kind of connect them to that liquidity rail and then centralize that started into a singular string level. Let's see. So the nice thing about this is instead of each individual app chain is kind of going and negotiating with each of these ecosystems and these bridge partners one at a time, it's a one-time thing that we have to do, and that every chainlet can automatically use this system without worrying about talking to people and doing. And so that's the step that we're doing right now. We're onboarding bridge partners to kind of connect to our. And then obviously the last thing we want also is to have application and DEXs on top. So we can bring in assets that we can also swap. You can imagine we can directly connect to other ecosystems and DEXs in other ecosystems. We can also have DEXs and NFT marketplaces within Saga, right? And so either in another chainlet or even in the liquidity, some DEXs in there essentially. And so now every chainlet that launches has an automatic connection to and access to a DEX. But this is generally not enough, right? So if you take a look at how bridging UI and UX works today, it's not great. Like, so imagine if we just did this, what would happen is, let's say I'm a user on one of the chainlets that have launched. I like to go to like somewhere like IBC offline, I forget what skip you need to do, but you go somewhere, some bridging transaction, you say, hey, I'm a bridge, to my chainlet, so you like do this, you do this like step essentially. And then maybe one day you're like, okay, I want to go and do a swap transaction. Then what you need to do is you need to navigate with the bridge UI, move the asset to the DEX essentially. And then in the DEX, you need to go and change the DEX UI now, do the swap, and then you have to go back to now the bridging UI and say, hey, I'm going to go bridge it back. And so in order for us to make this a little bit more simple, what we need to do is start improving the UX improvements for liquidity. And how do you do this? There are ways to unify experiences where the technology kind of works together with the user experience, where all of this is automated. So what we're trying to design now is a user experience where, let's say I'm a user or a developer that's deployed something on a chainlet. We want using a singular API to be able to essentially, let's say I minted an asset on my chainlet. I want to push this asset down to the liquidity layer, up to a DEX, swap it, and then there's another asset. That asset to push it down to the liquidity layer and back up to my chainlet all with a single transaction essentially, and that's been done automatically. And so this is the step afterwards that we're developing right now. Essentially, what we want to do is, this is great within the Saga ecosystem, but you can kind of extend this one step further, right? So if the liquidity rail is connected to Axelar as a general asset passing. So if you can do the same thing, where as a chainlet holder, I could say, I want to go down to the liquidity layer, go out to Axelar, go to E, make a trade there, come back, up down to the liquidity layer, and up to my chainlet automatically. Yes. Depending on which liquidity that you want to tap into, there's a single API that the developers can use essentially to get access to all of this. And so this is for the last few slides, you can see kind of like we're kind of building up this architecture of what we're building out. And a lot of this is really interesting because in Cosmos, there's, I would say there's pieces of all of this is kind of spread across everywhere. Like some teams are developing small parts here, other teams are developing other parts that are needed. And really somebody just needs to come and just like integrate all these features together into one to make it into a package where this automatic liquidity rail can be created. So that's what we're doing. We're talking with all the partners that are most on the EVM side, Exchange Lab on the IDC side, and bridge partners, etc., to unify this experience that developers don't have to think about, hey, do I want to launch my own chain or do I want to launch a layer one? Kind of do this on Saga and get your own layer one and kind of get the same experience that you would get if you just launch another layer one. And so I'm going to quickly talk through this, but on top of all the technical solutions and all the bridging and the liquidity stuff, there's still market services that Saga as a team essentially can help. And so these are things like token distribution marketing, or we kind of talk about this in the liquidity bootstrapping, initial price discovery, investment tools, technical integration. These are all things that once they have this automatic way of setting up all these experiences, improve for appchain developer. And so one of the things that we're doing is what we call the Saga Open Investment. The point of this is it's a marketing and distribution campaign for Saga partners building on Saga. I mentioned earlier that if they choose to have a token, essentially, one of the things that's pretty difficult is you need to be able to tap into like a community essentially to market your actual tokens. What we allow people to do is have airdrops, campaigns, things like that essentially that allows people to go and tap into the entirety of the Saga ecosystem. We've kind of systematically executing on this. So Vault 2 was the second vault that we had. We had about 285,000 coins. We have about 100 different partners signed up. And so we have so many that we're kind of pipelining them right now. So we're currently in Vault 2. The phase. But now then we'll be kind of planning out multiple vaults over time essentially to help the Saga ecosystem grow together. Other thing we're doing is Saga Origin. So one of the, if you guys haven't heard, but Saga, we're very focused on gaming and entertainment as a team right now. And one of the things that Web3 game developers have a lot of problems is getting traditional funding. Traditional game funding work very differently from where in crypto it's a lot of like grants and milestones. And the way that traditional game companies have actually funding in their space is through publishing grants, which is structured differently. And so Saga Origin is we've kind of started a publishing company essentially that works kind of more in line with the way that game companies are used to. And so Saga Origins is a place essentially where provocative, sensitive, uncompromising game experiences are coming for Web3 ultimately. We want to make that a reality. So grants versus publishing, I was kind of flick through this. Grants generally is mostly about fun. It's not just a dollar. Although right now, in this current snapshot, gaming funding is difficult. The difficulty in gaming is really not the funding. It's pretty simple to do. It's dollar in, you get some overall. What a lot of publishers do on top of that is all this other stuff. User acquisition, publishing, media, influencer, live services. These are all things that generally crypto companies and foundations don't think of for their users, but it's one of the ways essentially where Saga is also thinking about how to make the lives of the developers learn easier. Kind of the same way, equally we're building out this product that allows anybody to use. It's kind of the same way that you use layer one. We're trying to make essentially the experience of launching on Saga as universal and as easy as possible for developers. So this is kind of one of the paths that we're taking. Going back, this is the same slide that I talked about before, but I'm going to summarize this one more time. So, as mentioned, barriers to entry to appchains are kind of outlined on the middle column over there. And then how we're solving this essentially for developers over time. So deploying on Saga You don't need to worry about validators. Our platform handles that. You get the same validators that our agent uses. Staking token security, you don't have to worry about that. CCP will handle that automatically. RVC, index or wallet services, etc. Don't need to worry about any of that. Saga service provider stack automatically in the long run should be able to spin up anything. Similarly to how most layer ones has a default solution that you can use. Bridges the layer, etc. Automatic IDC emulator structure essentially brings this up automatically. And then on-ramps and DAX integration for liquidity, liquidity chain that we mentioned essentially solved a lot of that problem. And then go-to-market problems that are created by staking tokens that mostly exist because you don't have a staking token with Saga. And then we have a whole slew of augmented services that we solve with processing. And so the summary really is that we want the best launching experience for developers. And our thesis is that eventually, as we build this experience in the same going and launching on Ethereum, for example, as a smart contract versus deploying as on an app chain on Saga should look almost identical. So when the developer says, hey, I'm going to take the time to use assistance, you don't need to worry about these initial trade-offs essentially that they have to experiencing the best kind of developer platform in the world. And so that's me. This is a chart of our website. So if you're curious about what Saga is and what we're doing, come contact us and contact me. We have an interesting chat about how other projects can plug into some of the frameworks that we are creating each club. Okay. Yeah.
Really cool topic. I think you can kind of separate into pockets. Maybe the search for such you could say you're addressing a bit the mass market and the smaller use who just want to put something they don't really want to deal about else. And then there's the bigger teams, historical, UIDX or Manta or projects that they want to migrate chips.
Yeah.
But they need to get a feel for how what are all the context things. And I'm not sure if I think there is a market there. I don't know if you're trying to address that, but I think for that specific market, what seems to me, curious, that's what seems to me relevant there is you need to hold their hand a lot in the beginning, because like you said, you unite all of this complexity and we'll fly it away. But I think it is important for them. What is the complexity? What is even more important? How are they going to eventually phase out all of this complexity so that you get a hold of the different parts of the site? Because ultimately what they want is to control their variants. Right, was to control parts of the stack, maybe to change the privacy protocol, different models. Maybe they want to use ZK, maybe they want to become rollup. I don't know, but it's kind of like the phasing out of a lot of hand folding, less and less over time.
Yeah. Fundamentally, yes. I somewhat disagree actually with that notion. So the way that we think about Saga ultimately is the same way I would say the analogy to building your own data center versus using AWS. So let's say I'm a giant Web2 company and I'm like, hey, I'm going to create this really good thing. You would think that by going to AWS, it lose control over all the nitty-gritty details underneath, but you really don't, right? The point of it is the huge companies can figure out data center management, how cooling works, how all of that's essentially themselves, which is like kind of irrelevant to what they're building. And just use AWS. It's the reality of how things have gone, right? So Netflix, back in the old days, there was no cloud providers, and they built their own data centers everywhere. And then they quickly realized, wait, this is actually easier if you just use AWS and just migrate over to that, right? And so from our perspective, I think we are. The Saga essentially is AWS. Our economic model kind of mimics cloud. And we think in the long run, maybe some people will want their own app chain to do crazy stuff. And that's great. But even those companies who build their own data centers, I definitely use AWS. Somehow on the side, right? And the idea here is data centers don't scale. Build these like multi-million-dollar structures to build it. And then let's say your capacity is swollen. What are you going to do? Like most people, they end up borrowing capacity from AWS. And this is the model that we generally talk to, even with layer ones essentially. So let's say a layer one wants to extend the block space, where the block space is getting congested. Plus, right? We, as an economic model, I didn't talk about this since we don't collect gas from the actual chain as an infrastructure. And so from the perspective of the layer one, they can actually shard all their applications onto chainlets and still use the same token that they used their layer one, essentially. And so to the experience of the users, it looks exactly the same as if they're interacting with the layer one, but it's sharded out into 3 signals. And so we think there's a place for both. And I mean, we can't design our platform to do everything essentially, but we can make our platform flexible enough where most people will eventually either migrate or use both essentially. And that's the next state that we're trying to build.
So in Ethereum and rollups, there's tons of what there's centralized sequencing chains, so they're super fast and they're super performant. What's the trade-off here with Saga? That's not the way you're going for it. So how are you thinking about the trade-off, especially with gaming? I've heard about the chains need very, very fast speed. They need a lot of TPS. So how are you approaching that?
Yeah. So the roll-up space, as you mentioned, has specific designs and specific trade-offs. And in our mind, a lot of the times when a developer starts going the roll-up land, they actually, so the problems with roll-up is this problem that is this space, validators, taking phone security, all that. You're actually breaking apart some of these problems, and you're introducing like 9 different problems essentially that are associated with it when you start going down the modular process. And so, and this is where kind of the Ethereum land is running into, where they're like, oh, the usability of this is pretty terrible, because not only do we have to worry about this, there's like there's like some things that you have to worry about. And so, from our perspective, the idea is whether or not rollups is the winner or layer one and appchains is the winner, from our perspective, it doesn't matter. We're like, oh, let the market figure that out. Right now, we think the design decision of appchains are relevant. And so we are going to automate that. And when rollups do become better and they're faster, cheaper, more efficient, then we'll convert our software essentially to do rollups. But we don't see that, at least from our perspective. And so that's number one. And then number two is for scalability and for speed. Yeah, I mean, it's everything has a downside. So as soon as you go into a rollup to get better single sequencer speed, you run into bridging problems, other finality issues. So how do you solve those problems? You come back to exactly the design that we have. And so I'm not really sure if I have a feeling all of these solutions are going to converge back to something we are designing anyways. And so it's like, why do we want to break it apart first and then come back in? It's like, we'll just start with it all integrated and just go forward from there. And so that's our design philosophy. But yeah, thanks for the question.